Welcome to our deep dive, everyone, into warrior women.
Warrior women.
Yeah, are they just, these figures of myth and legend, or is there really like some historical truth to them?
Yeah. Good question.
So we've got a bunch of cool sources for this deep dive. We have a YouTube lecture by archaeologist Ellen Green,
Oh, cool.
and a Smithsonian Magazine article,
Okay.
and something from the Greeka website, which is all about Greek mythology.
That sounds like a good mix.
Yeah, it should be fun. And so Ellen Green is a bioarchaeologist.
Okay.
And she specializes in the late Iron Age and early Roman periods.
Got it.
But here's the thing. She's also a sword fighter.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. I wonder if that kind of, personal experience influences her perspective at all.
Yeah, I think it definitely could add a different layer to it, for sure.
Yeah.
So in her lecture, Green points out this really interesting thing. She shows this like classic reconstruction of an Ice Age scene.
Right.
And there are way fewer women than men.
Mm.
And the women are all doing like domestic stuff,
Right,
you
yeah.
know. But the men are out hunting and making tools and, kind of leading the way.
Interesting.
And it just makes you think about, how these types of images have shaped our views.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it just shows how those assumptions about the past can be so ingrained even in those like seemingly objective representations.
Right.
And that's where archaeology comes in, especially bioarchaeology, because by actually like examining the skeletal remains,
Right.
we can go beyond those assumptions and actually let the evidence speak for itself.
Yeah. So how do archaeologists, actually figure out if someone was a warrior,
Right.
especially when you're dealing with these ancient societies?
Yeah. So there are basically three types of evidence that we can look at.
Okay.
We have osteology, which is the study of bones.
Okay.
And then we have written accounts, which can be, a bit subjective.
Yeah.
And then grave goods, the things people are buried with.
Okay, cool. Let's start with bones.
Okay, so Green uses this really great example of a Scythian woman's grave from Armenia, which dates back to like the 8th to 6th centuries BCE.
Wow.
And the analysis of her skeleton just tells a fascinating story. So her arm muscles are uneven,
Okay.
which suggests that she was probably like a skilled archer.
Dang.
And her leg bones are super strong, so that points to her spending a lot of time on horseback.
Right. So she was riding horses and shooting a bow and arrow.
Exactly. And get this, she also has healed injuries,
Oh.
including an arrowhead that's like embedded in her knee
What?
and a healed clavicle fracture.
Oh my gosh. So she had been in battles before.
It seems like she had survived some previous encounters for sure.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it doesn't end there. So her cause of death
Okay.
was determined to be from multiple cut marks from swords and axes,
Oh, wow.
suggesting that she actually died fighting against multiple opponents.
So she died in battle.
It seems that way.
That's incredible.
So you can really picture this woman, right, as like a formidable warrior
Yeah,
who met her end in a pretty dramatic way.
that's amazing. Okay, so we have evidence from bones. What about those written accounts?
Right. So those can be a bit tricky
I bet.
because you always have to consider potential biases, and embellishments.
Right, of course.
So a great example is Boudica.
Okay.
She was the queen of the Iceni tribe in Britain,
Okay.
and she led this huge revolt against the Romans in 60 CE.
Wow.
And most of what we know about her comes from the Roman historian Tacitus.
Okay.
So he portrays her as, giving these fiery speeches to her troops, and she's like commanding a chariot alongside her daughters.
Wow.
And he even states that women leading Britons into battle was not a new thing at all.
Interesting. So even the Romans, who weren't exactly known for their gender equality,
Right.
still documented the existence of women warriors.
Yeah, it seems so. Now, of course, Tacitus probably exaggerated Boudica's speeches.
Yeah, I was going to say.
For dramatic effect.
Right.
But his choice to really focus on those women warriors probably reveals something about the Roman attitudes towards women in combat.
Yeah, it was clearly something they thought about.
Yeah, for sure. It both fascinated them and maybe unsettled them a little bit too.
Right.
But unfortunately, we don't actually have any of Boudica's physical remains.
Oh.
So we have to rely solely on those written accounts for her story.
It's like we're missing a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So we have bones and we have texts. What's that third type of evidence?
Grave goods.
Grave goods.
But those can be a little tricky too,
How so?
because they don't always directly reflect the person's life.
Okay.
So, for example, you sometimes find children buried with weapons
Right.
that they couldn't have possibly used.
Yeah.
So it's more symbolic,
Right.
than literal.
So context is key.
Exactly. Context is everything.
Gotcha. Okay, so any good examples of grave goods?
Yeah. So there's this incredible one.
Okay.
It's a really lavish 4th century BCE tomb from Agial, Romania.
Okay.
And it was initially thought to belong to a warrior king.
I bet there were weapons in there.
Oh, yeah. There was a helmet with gold inlay greaves jewelry. Wow.
And get this 100 trilobite arrowheads.
Wow, 100.
I know, it's amazing. And these arrowheads were specifically designed for warfare,
Okay.
not hunting.
So definitely not just a hunter.
Right, exactly.
Right, yeah.
So it really pointed to a life of combat.
Yeah. Okay, so sounds like a warrior king. Where's the twist?
The twist is that osteological analysis actually revealed the individual was female.
What?
Yeah. And there were also 3 horses buried with her,
Wow.
which suggests, a woman of considerable status and a potentially significant military role.
Yeah, for sure. And this takes us back to the Scythians, right?
It does.
Because they were present in this region.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they might hold the key to understanding her story further.
Oh, that's fascinating. We always hear about that, like, man, the hunter, woman, the gatherer thing for prehistoric societies.
Right.
But these findings, especially this one, seem to really challenge that.
They really do. Yeah, there's actually very little solid archaeological evidence
Really?
to support those really rigid gender roles in those prehistoric societies.
In fact, there was a really groundbreaking discovery in the Andes
Okay.
that totally turns that concept on its head.
What was that?
Archaeologists found this 9,000-year-old female hunter's grave.
Wow.
And it's really forced us to rethink, our assumptions about women's roles in the past.
Yeah, that's incredible. Okay, what was in this grave?
So she was buried with 20 projectile points,
Right.
various hunting tools, and the bones of big game, specifically vicuña,
Okay.
which are those llama-like animals that are native to the Andes.
Right.
And this discovery, along with others, really challenges that traditional man the hunter narrative.
It's amazing how, one discovery can just kind of shift our whole understanding of the past.
Totally.
So it seems like we keep seeing these graves that are initially identified as male,
Yeah.
and then they turn out to be female.
You're right. There's definitely a tendency to assume male dominance in the past,
Right.
and then be surprised when the evidence points to a more, complex reality.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So is there another example of that?
Yeah, we can look at another Etruscan tomb
Okay.
from 6th century BCE Italy,
Okay.
which was initially hailed as the grave of a warrior prince.
A warrior prince. All right. I'm hooked. Tell me more.
Okay, so this burial contained a spear, a bronze bowl, and what looked like a jewelry box,
Okay.
along with a separate female cremation.
Oh, so they thought, okay, classic warrior guy with his female companion.
Exactly, that was the initial assumption.
But I bet there's a twist.
There is a twist. Osteological analysis showed that the individual buried with the spear was actually female.
No way.
Yeah, and the cremation was male.
Oh, wow.
And remember that jewelry box?
Yeah.
It actually turned out to be a sewing kit.
What?
Yeah, that had been made from a repurposed shield boss.
A shield boss turned sewing kit. That's so cool. It's like they took something and repurposed it.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like there's more going on than just practicality.
Right, like a symbolic
That's
choice.
it. Yeah, for sure. And it gets even more interesting. The language used to describe the spear in the site reports actually changed
Really?
once the individual was identified as female.
Wow. How so?
So initially it was described as a symbol of virility,
Okay.
but after the reveal, it became a symbol of unity.
Wow. So the meaning of the object literally changed based on the gender
It seems that way.
of the person buried with it.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, how much our own interpretations are influenced by our modern biases.
It really does. And it makes you think, how do we separate our own baggage from our understanding of the past?
Right. It's a tough question, but I think the key is to acknowledge our biases and really look for evidence that challenges those assumptions,
Although,
so,
yeah.
so we can try to get a more accurate and nuanced view of history.
That makes a lot of sense. And, we've been focusing on the Iron Age and antiquity.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that these women warriors, they existed throughout history.
Right.
I mean, they pop up in all these different cultures and time periods.
You're absolutely right. And some of these examples might surprise you. Like, have you ever heard of Cynaine?
Cynaine, no, who is that?
She was Alexander the Great's half-sister.
Alexander the Great had a warrior half-sister.
She's a pretty fascinating figure. She actually led armies and died fighting.
Wow, I need to hear more about her.
So it's interesting to note that her mother was Illyrian,
Okay.
which connects her to those cultures of the steppe where those warrior women were more common.
Oh, okay.
And another really intriguing case is the debate surrounding those female gladiators in the Roman Empire.
Wait, female gladiators, were they really a thing?
So the evidence suggests that they did exist,
Wow.
but how common they were is still debated.
Okay.
So we have this inscription from Turkey
Okay.
that depicts a fight between two women gladiators named Amazon and Achillia.
Really?
Yeah, and there's also a 1st century CE statuette
Okay.
of a female gladiator holding a dagger and a sign of victory.
Wow, that's pretty convincing.
Yeah, right? But then there's this law that was passed by Emperor Septimus Severus that prohibited women from fighting in the arena.
Hmm. Well, that suggests it was happening enough to warrant a law.
Right, exactly. It makes you wonder if maybe it was seen as a threat to the established order or something.
Yeah, maybe. And then there's that case in London
Yes.
of a female cremation
Right.
from the 2nd century CE.
Yeah?
And she was buried with gladiator paraphernalia.
Yeah, so archaeologists are still debating her exact role in the arena.
Maybe she was a fighter, or maybe she was just connected to the game somehow.
Yeah, exactly. We may never know for sure.
It's a mystery.
Yeah.
And you mentioned women in the Roman army.
Right.
So did they actually serve?
Well, there's some possible evidence from Britain.
Okay.
So there are these cremations in a soldier's graveyard in Cumbria
Okay.
that are potentially of Scythian origin.
Wow.
And it suggests that maybe some women served in the Roman army.
Interesting, at least in some capacity.
Right.
And again, it shows that women's roles,
Yeah.
especially in the military,
Right.
were more complex than those traditional narratives tell us.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk Vikings,
Uh-huh.
those fierce Scandinavian raiders.
Yeah.
What's the story with women warriors among them?
So they left behind some pretty compelling archaeological evidence,
Oh.
including this famous Birka burial from Sweden.
Okay.
So this grave was packed with weapons, horses, and even a board game.
A board game.
I know, right?
That's not what I would expect in a warrior's grave.
Well, among the Vikings, game boards and pieces were actually strongly associated with military leaders,
Oh,
especially in boat burials.
okay.
And this wasn't a boat burial, but it had a lot of similarities.
Gotcha.
And here's the big reveal. Osteological analysis in 2018 identified the individual as female.
A female Viking warrior, that must have caused quite a stir.
Oh, yeah. There was a lot of controversy and even accusations against the researchers,
Right.
because it challenged that deeply ingrained narrative about the Vikings as being, male-dominated.
Right.
But if you look at the Viking sagas, there are accounts of shield maidens.
Oh, that's right.
And then there are the Valkyries in Norse mythology.
So it wasn't completely unheard of in Viking culture.
Not at all. But the Birka burial really forced people to confront the evidence and reconsider those assumptions,
Right.
And it suggests that women might have held, much more prominent positions within Viking society than we previously thought.
That's fascinating. It's like we're constantly having to adjust our lens on history
Right.
as we learn new things.
Yeah, exactly. And uncover new evidence.
And it reveals this more like intricate and diverse picture of the past.
Absolutely. And perhaps no civilization embodies this better than the Scythians, who we've been talking about quite a bit today.
That's true. They keep popping up, the Armenian archer, the wealthy female burial in Romania.
Right.
So what was it about their culture that led to this really prominent role for women warriors?
So the Scythians and other related nomadic tribes like the Sarmatians and Sarmatians were pretty fascinating.
Okay.
They were skilled horseback riders known for their archery and their really bright clothing and intricate tattoos.
Wow.
And to the Greeks, they were seen as barbaric.
Barbaric. What did they do?
Well, for one thing, their women wore trousers and drank alongside men.
Oh, the horror. But seriously, why were they so accepting of women warriors?
Well, their nomadic lifestyle probably played a big role
How so?
because they couldn't afford to leave half their population behind when they were migrating or fighting,
Right. Everyone had to contribute.
Yeah, everyone had to pull their weight.
So it was a matter of practicality.
For some extent, yeah. But there's also this really interesting link between the Scythians and the Amazons in Greek mythology.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, so Herodotus, that Greek historian,
Yeah.
he claimed that the Scythians were actually descendants of the Amazons.
So those legendary warrior women from those Greek myths could have been inspired by real Scythian women.
It's definitely a possibility, and the geographical location of the Amazons in those Greek accounts often aligns with Scythian territory.
Oh, wow.
And if you look at Greek art depicting Amazons,
Yeah.
they often wear that distinctive Scythian-style clothing and hats.
So it wasn't just some random invention.
It seems that way.
There was some real-world inspiration behind those myths.
Yeah, and the archaeological evidence supports this, too.
Really?
There are all these examples of Scythian women buried with weapons,
Okay.
and their skeletons show signs of a life that involved combat.
Like that 12 or 13-year-old girl from Tuva, Russia, who
Exactly.
was buried with all those weapons.
Yes, that's an incredible case. DNA analysis actually helped researchers determine her sex, even though her skeleton hadn't fully matured yet.
Wow, and she's not alone, right?
No, she's definitely not alone. About one-third of Scythian women's graves contain weapons.
One-third, that's a huge number.
It is. It really is. It suggests that women warriors weren't an exception.
Yeah.
They were a common part of Scythian society.
Wow. And then there's that tomb from Russia
Yeah.
with the 3 generations of women.
Yes, 2 of them were buried with weapons, and one was even positioned as if she was riding a horse.
It's like we're getting a glimpse into their lives,
Mm.
their culture, and their beliefs about gender roles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how these ancient societies challenge our modern ideas of what's male and female.
It really does make you think, and their approach to gender was clearly much more fluid than we often assume.
Right.
But there's another layer to this story that we need to explore: the Sauromations and Sarmatians, those nomadic people who were closely related to the Scythians.
Okay.
And their burial practices and social structures can tell us even more about the role of women warriors in these ancient cultures.
Okay, this is getting more and more interesting. I can't wait to hear what you have to share about the Sarmatians and Sarmatians.
All right, let's dive in.
Let's do it.
So the Sauromations and Sarmatians were a lot like the Scythians in that they were nomadic people who roamed those vast steppes of Eurasia.
Okay.
And their burial mounds, these things called kurgans,
Okay.
they offer this really unique window into their lives and beliefs.
Interesting.
And the Smithsonian article you shared highlights some really incredible discoveries in these kurgans.
Okay, so what kind of discoveries are we talking about?
Well, archaeologists found graves of women
Okay.
who were buried with their weapons.
Just like the Scythians.
Exactly. It seems like this practice of honoring women warriors in death was something they shared across these related cultures.
That's cool. So what do these warrior women's graves tell us?
So one young woman, her legs were actually bowed from years of riding,
Wow.
and she was found with an iron dagger and a quiver with 40 bronze-tipped arrows.
Wow, 40 arrows. That's incredible.
I know, right? Imagine the skill and precision she must have had.
It's amazing to picture her riding across those steps,
Yeah,
armed and ready for anything.
exactly.
So she was clearly a fighter. These weren't just symbolic burials.
No, definitely not. And another woman's skeleton still had a bent arrowhead embedded in it,
Oh, wow.
which suggests that she probably died from her wounds, maybe in battle.
Wow, that's incredible.
And the article also mentioned something about their physical stature.
Oh, yeah, what was that?
So on average, these women warriors were about 5 feet 6 inches tall.
Wow, which was remarkably tall for that time period.
Yeah, that's tall even for today.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So their height, combined with those weapons and battle scars,
Yeah.
really paints this picture of these formidable warriors.
Yeah.
Women who commanded respect and probably instilled fear in their enemies.
It's like they were those real-life Amazons, the
Right.
ones who inspired those Greek myths.
Exactly. And speaking of the Greeks, didn't Herodotus say something about those Sauramatian women?
He did. He wrote that no girl shall wed until she has killed a man in battle.
Wow. That's quite a marriage requirement.
Yeah, it really is. Now, I know Herodotus wasn't always the most reliable source,
True.
but this account, even if it's embellished,
Right.
it gives us a glimpse into how these women were perceived by outsiders.
Yeah. I mean, it suggests a level of equality
Yeah.
and respect for women that was pretty rare in the ancient world.
Yeah, it really makes you think about what we consider a civilized society. Right, because to the Greeks, those women riding horses, fighting battles, and holding positions of power
Right.
might have seemed really barbaric.
Yeah.
But to the Scythians and Sarmatians, it was just life,
Yeah. It's a good reminder that we should always try to understand other cultures on their own terms.
For sure.
Not judge them by our own values.
Absolutely.
And that's what makes archaeology so fascinating.
It really is, because it lets us step back in time and see the world through the eyes of people who live such different lives from our own.
Yeah.
And in the case of these warrior women, it forces us to rethink our assumptions about gender roles
Yeah.
and the potential for women throughout history.
We've talked a lot about that physical evidence.
Yeah.
The bones, the weapons, the grave goods.
Right.
But there's also this really powerful symbolic aspect to these discoveries, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, these warrior women, they've become these cultural icons.
They have.
They challenge traditional gender roles and they embody strength and resilience.
Right.
And it's fascinating how their image has been reinterpreted and reimagined throughout history.
Yeah, like Wonder Woman.
Exactly. She's a perfect example.
I mentioned her earlier.
Yeah.
And it's so true. Like, she's a perfect example of how that archetype of that powerful female warrior
Yeah.
just keeps captivating us.
Totally. And while Wonder Woman is obviously fictional,
Right.
her origins are really rooted in these ancient myths
Right.
and archaeological discoveries.
For sure.
She embodies that enduring archetype, that
Yeah.
strong, independent, justice-seeking woman warrior
Yeah.
that really resonates across cultures and across time.
And it's not just Wonder Woman. It's like we're seeing more and more female action heroes
Yes.
in movies and TV shows, and more women in leadership roles,
Yeah.
and this growing recognition of the strength of women throughout history.
It's a positive trend, I think.
Definitely.
It's like we're reclaiming this part of our collective history that's been overlooked for so long.
Yeah.
And by acknowledging those contributions of women in the past, it expands the possibilities for women in the present and future.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's about recognizing that full spectrum of human potential.
Yes.
Regardless of gender, and understanding that women have always been active participants in shaping history,
Right.
even when their stories haven't been told.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that this is an ongoing process.
Of course.
We're still uncovering new evidence, challenging old assumptions, and reinterpreting the past in light of new perspectives.
It's a journey of discovery,
It is.
and we're all on it together.
Exactly. And that's what's so exciting about it. There's still so much to learn and explore,
Yeah.
and so many more stories waiting to be told.
And I have a feeling the more we dig into the past, the more we'll discover that women have always been there,
Oh, I agree.
shaping the world in these really remarkable and unexpected ways.
Absolutely. And I think it's almost inevitable.
So as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive into these women warriors,
Yeah.
what are some of the key takeaways? What have we learned so far?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to remember to question our assumptions,
Yeah.
We can't just accept those traditional historical narratives at face value.
Right.
We have to be willing to dig deeper and challenge the dominant paradigms
For sure.
and really look for that evidence that contradicts what we think we know.
Yeah, that's such an important point, and it applies to so many things, not just history.
Right.
Science, politics, social issues, everything.
Exactly. It's about being critical and open to new information and perspectives.
That's so true. Another takeaway is that those gender roles,
Yeah,
they're not fixed,
they're not.
but they're fluid,
Right.
and they're culturally constructed.
What's masculine in one society can be totally different in another.
It's all about perspective.
It is.
And the more perspectives we have,
Yeah,
the better our understanding will be.
absolutely.
And that's why it's so important to have diverse voices
Yes.
in fields like archaeology and history and anthropology.
Couldn't agree more.
The more diverse our researchers and scholars are, the more likely we are to uncover those hidden histories and challenge those long-held assumptions.
Exactly. Diversity of thought and experience is key.
So for our listeners who are like totally fascinated by these women warriors,
Yeah.
what resources or avenues for further exploration would you recommend?
Ooh, there are so many good ones out there. But for starters, I highly recommend checking out Adrienne Mayer's work.
Oh yeah, she's great.
Yeah, she's written a ton about the Amazons and other warrior women, and her research is just so fascinating and thought-provoking.
Yeah, her book, The Amazons, Lives and Legends of Warrior Women Across the Ancient World, is like a must-read for anyone interested in this topic.
Yes, it's a brilliant blend of history, mythology, and archaeological research.
And for people who are more visual learners,
Yeah.
there are some great documentaries out there, too.
Oh, tons of them.
Like Secrets of the Dead, Amazon Women.
That's a good one.
It explores the archaeological evidence for women warriors in those steppes of Eurasia.
Yeah, and of course there's just a ton of information online.
Right.
Articles, blog posts, videos, you name it. Just search for warrior women or Scythians or Amazons, and you'll find a ton of stuff.
Just be careful about your sources, though.
Oh, yeah, good point. Not everything you find online is accurate.
Right. So stick to reputable institutions and scholars.
Exactly. Look for those reliable sources.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to go deep.
Right.
I mean, this topic can lead you in so many different directions, from ancient mythology to modern gender politics.
Absolutely. It's a journey of discovery, and I encourage everyone to embrace it.
Yeah, you never know what you might find.
Exactly.
Okay, so circling back to those key takeaways,
Right.
we talked about challenging assumptions, the fluidity of gender roles, and the impact of cultural biases.
Yeah.
But is there one more thing we should really emphasize?
I think it's crucial to recognize the power of storytelling.
Yeah.
because these stories of women warriors, they've resonated throughout history because they tap into something really deeply human,
Yeah.
something that transcends time and culture.
Yeah, for sure.
And they speak to our capacity for courage, resilience, and strength,
Right.
regardless of gender.
That's a really good point. They remind us that we all have that potential to be warriors in our own right,
Exactly.
to fight for what we believe in, to overcome obstacles, and to make a difference in the world.
Yes. It's about finding that inner warrior, that inner strength,
Yeah.
regardless of our gender or background or
I
circumstances.
love that.
And maybe by learning from these incredible women from the past,
Yeah.
we can create a future where everyone has the opportunity to shine.
It's a beautiful thought.
Thank you.
And I think these warrior women would be really proud of us for carrying on their legacy.
I think so too.
They remind us that nothing is impossible, that boundaries are meant to be broken, and that history is always being rewritten.
That's a great way to put it.
So let's all go out there and write our own stories.
Yes.
Stories that are bold, courageous, and authentically our own.
I love it.
And let's honor those warrior women by creating a world where everyone has the freedom to be strong, to be brave, and to leave their mark.
Beautifully said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
It has. The pleasure was all mine. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing those boundaries.
I'll second that. So those Sarmatians, much like the Scythians,
Yeah.
they were nomadic people who roamed those vast steppes of Eurasia.
Right.
And their burial mounds, those things called kurgans.
Kurgans.
Yeah, they offer this really unique window into their lives and their beliefs.
Oh, interesting.
And that Smithsonian article that you shared, it highlights some truly incredible discoveries in these kurgans.
Okay, so what kind of discoveries are we talking about?
Well, archaeologists have found graves of women buried with their weapons.
Just like the Scythians.
Exactly. It seems like this practice of honoring women warriors in death was something shared across these related cultures.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what did these warrior women's graves tell us?
Well, one young woman, her legs were bowed from years of riding. Wow.
And she was found with an iron dagger and a quiver containing 40 bronze-tipped arrows.
40 arrows. Wow. That's amazing.
I know, right? And imagine the skill and precision.
It's incredible to picture her, riding across the steppes armed and ready for battle.
Oh, yeah, totally. And these weren't just symbolic burials.
Right.
These women were active participants in warfare.
Yeah, for sure. And there was another one.
Yeah, another woman's skeleton still had a bent arrowhead embedded in it,
Oh, wow.
which suggests that she probably died from her wounds, maybe in the heat of combat.
That's intense.
Yeah.
And I remember the article also mentioned something about their physical stature.
Right. So on average, these women warriors, they measured around 5 feet 6 inches tall.
Wow, that's tall.
Yeah. Remarkably tall for that time period.
Yeah, for sure. Even for today.
Right. So their height combined with their weapons and battle scars, it really paints this picture of formidable warriors,
Yeah.
women who commanded respect and probably instilled fear in their enemies.
It's like they were those real-life Amazons.
The ones who may have inspired those Greek myths.
Exactly. And speaking of the Greeks, Herodotus, he had something to say about the Sarmatian women.
That's right. He said that no girl shall wed until she has killed a man in battle.
Wow, that's quite a marriage requirement.
Right. I mean, I know Herodotus wasn't always the most reliable,
True.
but this account, even if it's a little embellished,
Yeah.
it really gives us a glimpse into how these women were perceived by outsiders.
It does. It suggests this level of equality and respect for women that was pretty rare back then.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what we even consider a civilized society.
Right, because to the Greeks, these women riding horses, fighting battles, holding positions of power, they might have seemed barbaric. But to the Scythians and Sarmatians, it was just life.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that we should always try to understand other cultures on their own terms.
Absolutely.
Not judge them by our own values.
I agree.
And that's what's so cool about archaeology. It lets us step back in time
Yeah.
and see the world through the eyes of people who live such different lives.
Yeah. And in the case of these warrior women, it really forces us to rethink our assumptions about gender roles and women's potential throughout history.
We've talked a lot about the physical evidence.
Yeah.
The bones, the weapons, the grave goods.
Right.
But there's also this really powerful symbolic aspect to these discoveries, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, these warrior women have become these cultural icons,
Yeah.
They challenge traditional gender roles.
Right.
And they embody strength and resilience.
Total. And it's so fascinating how their image has been reinterpreted and reimagined over time.
I know, like Wonder Woman.
Exactly.
Perfect example.
Yeah, I mentioned her earlier.
Yeah.
It's so true. She embodies that archetype of the powerful female warrior.
That enduring archetype.
Right.
That strong, independent, justice-seeking woman warrior.
Yeah, and it just resonates across cultures and across time.
Totally. And it's not just Wonder Woman. We're seeing more and more female action heroes
Right.
in movies and TV shows, and more women in leadership roles.
And this growing recognition of the strength of women throughout history.
Yeah, it's a positive trend.
It is.
It
It's
is.
like we're reclaiming this part of our collective history that's been overlooked for so long.
Exactly. And by acknowledging the contributions of women in the past, it really expands possibilities for women in the present and future.
I totally agree. It's about recognizing that full spectrum of human potential regardless of gender.
Yes.
And understanding that women have always been active participants in shaping history,
Right.
even when their stories haven't been told.
For sure. And this is an ongoing process.
Absolutely.
We're still uncovering new evidence, challenging old assumptions, and reinterpreting the past in light of new perspectives.
It's a journey,
It is.
and we're all on it together.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so exciting. There's still so much to learn and explore, and so many more stories waiting to be told.
And I have a feeling the more we dig into the past, the more we'll discover that women have always been there,
Oh, I agree.
shaping the world in these remarkable and often unexpected ways.
Absolutely. And I think it's almost inevitable.
So as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive into these women warriors,
Yeah.
what are some of the key takeaways? What have we learned?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to remember to question our assumptions.
Yeah.
We can't just accept those traditional historical narratives at face value.
Right.
We have to be willing to dig deeper and challenge the dominant paradigms and really look for evidence that contradicts what we think we know.
That's such an important point, and it applies to so many things, not just history, but science,
Yeah.
politics, social issues, everything.
Absolutely. It's about being critical and open to new information and perspectives.
That's so true. Another takeaway is that those gender roles,
Right.
they're not fixed, but they're fluid and they're culturally constructed.
What's masculine in one society can be totally different in another.
Right. It's all about perspective.
It is.
And the more perspectives we have,
Yeah.
the richer our understanding will be.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's so important to have diverse voices,
Yeah.
in fields like archaeology, history, anthropology.
Couldn't agree more.
The more diverse our researchers and scholars are, the more likely we are to uncover those hidden histories and challenge those assumptions.
Exactly. Diversity of thought and experience is key.
So for our listeners who are totally fascinated by these women warriors,
Yeah.
what resources or avenues for further exploration would you recommend?
Oh, there are so many great ones out there. But for starters, I highly recommend checking out Adrienne Mayer's work.
Oh yeah, she's great.
She's written so much about the Amazons and other warrior women, and her research is just fascinating and thought-provoking.
Her book, The Amazons, Lives and Legends of Warrior Women Across the Ancient World, is a must-read for anyone interested in this topic.
It really is. It's such a brilliant blend of history, mythology, and archaeological research.
And for those who are more visual learners,
Right.
there are also some excellent documentaries out there,
Oh, tons of them.
like Secrets of the Dead, Amazon Women,
That's a good one.
which explores the archaeological evidence for women warriors in the steppes of Eurasia.
And of course, there's just a ton of information online, articles, blog posts, videos, you name it. Just search for warrior women or Scythians or Amazons, and you'll find a ton of stuff.
Yeah. Just a reminder to be discerning about your sources, though.
Yes, good point. Not everything you find online is accurate or reliable.
Right. So look for information from reputable institutions and scholars and publications.
Exactly. Look for those reliable sources.
And don't be afraid to go deep.
Yeah,
I mean, this topic can lead you in all sorts of exciting directions,
absolutely.
from ancient mythology to modern-day gender politics.
It's a journey of discovery, and I encourage everyone to embrace it.
You never know what you might find.
Exactly.
So circling back to those key takeaways,
Right.
we've talked about challenging assumptions, understanding the fluidity of gender roles, recognizing the impact of cultural biases.
Yeah.
But is there one more thing we should really emphasize?
I think it's really crucial to recognize the power of storytelling.
Okay.
These stories of women warriors, they've resonated throughout history because they tap into something deeply human, something that transcends time and culture.
That's true.
And they really speak to our capacity for courage, resilience, and strength, regardless of gender.
Yeah, they remind us that we all have that potential to be warriors in our own right, to
Exactly.
fight for what we believe in, to overcome obstacles to make a difference in the world.
Yes, it's about finding that inner warrior, that inner strength, regardless of our gender or background or circumstances.
I love that. And maybe by learning from these incredible women from the past,
Yeah,
we can create a future where everyone has that opportunity to shine.
that's a beautiful vision, and I think these warrior women would be proud of us for carrying on their legacy.
I think so too. They remind us that nothing is impossible, that boundaries are meant to be broken,
Yeah,
and that history is constantly being rewritten.
that's a great way to put it.
So let's all go out there and write our own stories.
Yes,
Stories that are bold, courageous, and authentically our own.
I love.
And let's honor the legacy of those warrior women by creating a world where everyone has the freedom to be strong, to be brave, and to leave their mark.
Beautifully said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been such a pleasure exploring this with you.
The pleasure was all mine. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing those boundaries.
I'll second that. You know, it's amazing how these stories of women warriors, they really challenge our ideas about strength and femininity.
Yeah.
Because for so long, those things have been seen as like opposites,
Right.
as if you can't be both strong and feminine.
It's a false dichotomy that's persisted for way too long.
Right.
I mean, these warrior women, they were skilled fighters,
Yeah.
strategists, leaders.
Yeah.
But they were also women, they might have worn trousers and carried weapons.
Right.
But they also adorned themselves with jewelry. They had families. They expressed themselves in ways that were considered feminine within their cultures.
Right. It's a good reminder that those things aren't mutually exclusive.
And it's fascinating how those ancient cultures, the ones that are often labeled as, primitive or barbaric,
Yeah.
they seem to have had this much more fluid understanding of gender roles than many societies today.
It's true. It makes you wonder if we've lost something along the way.
Yeah, right? It's like we tend to think of progress as linear,
Right.
with the past being less enlightened than the present.
Yeah.
But when it comes to gender roles, it seems like some ancient societies were ahead of the curve.
They really did recognize and value the contributions of women in all aspects of life, including warfare.
Yeah, so maybe we can learn something from their example.
Right.
Instead of viewing history as this straight line,
Yeah.
maybe it's more like a spiral.
I like that.
We keep revisiting those similar themes and challenges, but hopefully with each cycle we gain a little more wisdom.
I agree.
So what does this all mean for us today?
Right.
Why should we care about these warrior women from the past?
Yeah, what does it matter?
What's the relevance to our modern lives?
Well, for me, it's about recognizing the full spectrum of human potential.
Okay.
History has so often been told from this male perspective,
Yeah.
and women's contributions are minimized or erased altogether.
Right.
And by uncovering these stories of women warriors, we're not just adding women to the history books,
Right.
we're expanding our understanding of what it means to be human.
That's a great way to put it. It's about challenging those limiting beliefs.
Yes.
About what women are capable of.
If women could be warriors thousands of years ago, what's stopping us from breaking down barriers and achieving our full potential today?
Right. It's about rewriting that narrative.
Exactly.
Not just the historical narrative, but the narratives we tell ourselves about who we are and what we can achieve.
Couldn't agree more, and that's a powerful message to take away from this deep dive.
Yeah.
We all have that potential to be warriors in our own way.
Right. To fight for what we believe in, to overcome challenges, to make our mark on the world.
It's about finding that inner warrior, that inner strength, regardless of our gender or background or circumstances.
Yeah. And maybe by learning from these incredible women from the past, we can create a future where everyone has that opportunity,
Yeah,
to embrace their full potential and make their unique contribution.
that's a beautiful vision. I think those warrior women would be proud of us for carrying their legacy forward.
I think so too.
They remind us that nothing is impossible, that boundaries are meant to be broken, and that history is constantly being rewritten.
So let's go out there and write our own stories.
Yes.
Stories that are bold and courageous and authentically our own.
I love it.
And let's honor the legacy of those warrior women by striving to create a world where everyone has the freedom to be strong, to be brave, and to leave their mark.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive.
It's been an honor exploring this with you.
The pleasure was all mine, and until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Ah.